All right, welcome everyone to another Friday live stream. Did everyone like the new intro music? It's a cloudy day here in Nashville. As you can see in Oahu, it's nice and sunny. I can see the light pouring into to both of your screens there. It's amazing. So this week I have KoHana Distillers on. We have Kyle Reutner, who is the general manager, Tyler Johnson, the distiller there. I'm really excited to have you guys on. I know both of you have attended many of the live streams in the past, so you've been on my list for a while. But I mean, obviously there's only a small number of rum distilleries in the U.S. right now that are growing their own sugarcane. You guys are one of them, and you've been doing it for a lot longer than many of them. And I think it's becoming more and more common to see producers, find some creative ways to get their hands on some fresh juice and do a batch here and there, which is great. I love to see it, but it's still pretty rare to see producers kind of going all in and really not only running a distillery but also running a farm. It's really exciting to see. So I'm super excited to learn more about it, to kind of take people into what you guys do there, your production process and everything. Before we jump in, I want to say hello to everyone. Awesome. We already have John Atkins, who says he has been to KoHana and that it is awesome. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I know many of you have joined us before. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have a question at any point, just click the Ask a Question button at the bottom. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. If you see me looking to my left, it's because I am watching the chat and the questions over there. And last but not least, feel free to share the event. There's a share button at the top right. You can invite your friends to join us. But with all that said, Kyle, Tyler, thanks so much for being here. I know it's, 7 a.m. there right now?
Yeah, it's about 7.
Yeah.
The farm guys are only an hour into their work already, so we'll complain about it being early.
Yeah.
Awesome. So before we jump in, I'd love for both of you to kind of just let people know, what your role is at KoHana, how you ended up there, and just give a little introduction.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be on here with you. Obviously, being able to chat with rum aficionados in this way is fantastic. I'm Kyle Reutner. I'm the general manager at KoHana Rum. So my general job is to manage the company. I'm in charge of keeping sort of the 6 arms of the company paddling in the same direction, whether it's
there's
farming.
6 arms.
I mean, if you think about the whole company, yeah. So it's farming. You can think about production, which is fermentation, distillation, and barreling. Then you can think about the experience center that we have here, outside sales, accounting, and then marketing. So it's making sure all 6 of those groups all can work together and help us go in the right direction, paddle the correct way. So that's what I do here. I started with the company full time about 6 years ago, but I've been a part of the company for about a decade. So, and I just ended up getting lucky. I come from a hospitality background, a degree in chemistry, and then I found happiness in hospitality, and I ended up just in the right place at the right time. Ran into the founders, and it was all meant to be.
I was going to say, a degree in chemistry and a background in hospitality is like the perfect combination for everything you just listed.
I got to build my own job based on my own skill set. So if I fail, it's really me failing.
No pressure. No pressure. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Tyler, what about you? I know before we went live, we were talking a little bit about your background in bartending, and you were talking me through some of the more impressive garnishes that you came up with in your day, one of which included a Ninja Turtle. We don't have to go too much into detail there, but I could not bring that up. But tell me how you got into distilling and how you ended up at KoHana.
Like you said, I was bartending down in town in Waikiki here on Oahu. And it took probably about a year or so of pestering Kyle to come pull hoses. There was not an opening here. I just kind of forced my own and made my own opening. I think it took enough times of Kyle touching bars and me coming up behind him so when can I come work? What's that going to happen?
Right.
And I think it took when I told him, like, I'm just going to move to the Caribbean. I'm leaving Hawaii. Like, I want to get into rum. Like, if you're not going to let me, I'm just going to go do it. And then he was like, all right. Yeah, I was like, all right. Like, let me see. Maybe next week we'll have you come pull hoses one day. And then it just kind of started one day a week, and then 2 days, 3 days, still bartending all the time. And then finally it just kind of, I left hospitality and just came straight into production. So
here you are. Sometimes you have to give an ultimatum.
Yeah.
It's tough though, because you get this all the time. Like, you have a lot of people that offer to do stuff like that, but nobody's willing to come actually pull hoses until you find somebody that actually is. So Tyler was one of those, guys that like, no, like I actually know that I want to be doing this. We get them. I'm sure every distiller out there can talk about like how many offers there are for this, and now Tyler gets to deal with it. Everybody's
hey
saying,
man, you have a spot for me? Yeah.
Exactly. But he definitely earned it, literally coming whenever he could for a year, working, just doing whatever schlepp work he could. It was awesome.
That's awesome. So if you had gone through with your promise to go to the Caribbean to learn rum making, I'm curious, what would have been like the top 3 islands on your list?
I mean, I would have liked to have gone to Martinique, but considering I only took 2 years of French in high school, I don't know how much. I was like, well, I know some French. I might be able to get by, but probably not. I don't really, I couldn't say, more there, I think it would be, where would they take me?
Right.
I think would be the, I don't think I, especially at that point, would have no say on, like my pick of the crop, but,
sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I know I gave a little bit of background for people on what KoHana is very briefly. I think most people are familiar with the fact that you guys are growing your own sugarcane. You're making rum from the juice, which, as I said, is still pretty unique in the U.S. right now. For those like who are less familiar with you guys, who haven't had the chance to come out there and experience it, Kyle, if you could kind of just bring people up to speed on who y'all are, how long you've been making rum, and how you describe, the style of what you guys make. What's your philosophy with rum?
Yeah, so let's just go right to the beginning. We're a grass to glass rum distillery. Everything that goes into our bottle, we farm. We are of Hawaii and only of Hawaii. There's nothing imported, there's nothing added. It's grass grown here, right? So sugarcane is a beautiful calorically dense grass, and we grow that. So that's the first thing that makes us different. The second thing that really sets us apart is we only grow heirloom Hawaiian varietals. Okay. So when you look at the history of sugarcane, it usually gets told like, all right, it starts in either Papua New Guinea or India or China, and there's different philosophies for this. And it travels across the Asian continent, and it eventually gets to Northern Africa and Europe. Europeans love it. There's a wonderful books written about this. You can read all kinds of things. I'm not going to go into it for everybody out there, but it eventually gets to Hispaniola on Columbus's second voyage to the New World, goes all through the Caribbean. Then it eventually comes through the mainland US, and in the 1800s, contact is made with Hawaii, and you've now got all of these plantations that pop up in Hawaii. That story is a colonizer story in a lot of ways, instead of talking about the real root of sugarcane to Hawaii, which predates Caribbean sugarcane by about 500 years. So we had or sugarcane on our islands 500 years before Columbus's journey, and it was here for different reasons. I mean, when you think about the different types of canes that exist on these islands, they were unique to Polynesia, because they had changed throughout all of that journey, and we really have some unique varietals, and that's a big part of what sets us aside, is only growing those canoe crops.
Right. I threw up a couple of images on the screen right now, and if you look closely, you can see just in physical appearance how different some of these varietals are that you guys deal with out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. So we, as a general philosophy, we look at 4 major differentiation factors that you can have as a manufacturer of any sort of consumable good. And that's that you have to have like a produce or a plant. You have to have a place, you have to have production, and you have to have people. And we define ourselves very much by the plant via the place and less about production and people. And that's not to take away from how much work gets done on that other side, but we very much, on our bottle, we put KoHana, which translates to the work of the sugarcane, because without these plants, we are nothing. So there's a really, I think in our dogma, it all relates back to Ko. And that's where everything is based around. Tyler's production methods are based around making sure we represent Ko in the best way possible. So when we look at production, we look at trying to represent the cane the best we can. So for anybody out there that didn't catch it, Ko is Hawaiian for sugarcane.
Right. And so take me into what the sugarcane production looks like for you guys. When, like, how much time did it take to kind of get up to speed in terms of planning and being able to harvest? How much are you guys growing? How close is it to the distillery? Just kind of like bring us into what that looks like.
Yeah, and for everybody out there, we have a million buzz phrases. We're not that kind of place that says small batch and this and that. But we do everything estate grown because we have to, and nobody was growing these types of sugar canes in mass before we were. So if we're going to talk about Ko, you really were only finding heirloom Hawaiian Ko in botanical gardens and aunties' backyards when we started this process. So it's like, as Dr. Noah Lincoln and our 2 founders, Jason Brand and Robert Dawson, were looking into how this process could work, they went and sought out, like any good entrepreneur does, all the intelligent people and tried to gather that information and find sort of the truth within it. So the first cane that they came across that was, of major interest to them was Manulele, which is
and you've got some
a cane
right there.
that means bird in flight or flying bird. And it came from, they think, Tonga and Tahiti, which is interesting. So Dr. Noah Lincoln was pursuing his PhD at Stanford at the time. He's an ethnobotanist, which, yes, that's a real thing. And he was looking to essentially go back and find all of these noble canes and canoe crops and really get to the bottom of them. Now he studies ulu, which is breadfruit. So as he was doing this, we were marching alongside of him going, well, we're going to grow these plants and see, how they can work. And every scientist said, you're crazy. There's a reason why they all went away. There's a reason why we bred out a lot of the genetic factors of these things.
Right.
But the truth is these plants are meant to grow here. So why would we turn our backs on that? I get it. Like, if you're going to compete in the commodities market, you have to, right? But we're not in that space. We're in the space for flavor and for interesting things. Like, we're pursuing, frankly, gluttony, right? Like, there's some like gorgeousness to that. So for us, growing these original crops that existed 800 years before contact, like that's the right thing to do. These are meant to be growing here. So for us, we grow 34 genetically unique varietals. I'll make a comment on this. Everybody says 30 or 40. There's something really interesting about, like, taking the scientific side of it and saying that. There's actually almost 100 different named canes.
Oh, wow.
And they just slide into, oh, this is the same one genetically. But am I really going to tell the gentleman that we begged for a cutting from on Maui that I chose the name of the botanical garden on Oahu? No,
Right.
like, his family had been growing that for eons. Why would we get rid of that? And so there's an indigenous intelligence too. Like, we can talk about the science, but there's also the truth, and that's something we have to be really respectful of when we talk about Ko. Is there's stories that go along with all these. There's traditions. There's things that predate so much of what we think about when we're, doing bottles of things, and we're doing that. When we level on everything, we really have to be smart about how we treat these gorgeous plants. So that's a big part of who we are and what we are. As far as growing, we have about 40 acres of production cane right now.
Okay.
And then we have another 10 acres that's a seed farm. So we have some significant growing to do. We'll cut about 1/6 of an acre in a day, all by hand. That's Sarai out there in the field.
Oh,
he's
awesome.
A stud. He lives right across the street from the distillery, actually.
Very cool.
So these pictures are both from we have 3 different fields. We have one in Waialua, which is near the North Shore, one right next to the distillery, just past a little lettuce farm, and one in southern Kunia. And there's 2 reasons for this. You don't want to grow all of your cane in one place, because if there's disease or fire, you could ruin all of your crop. But the second thing is that they have different notes as well. Like if you get closer to the ocean versus more inland, you actually have a difference in not as much soil type, but in whatever else is going on. So there's some uniqueness there too. We'll cut about 1/6 of an acre, as I was saying. That will yield around 4 tons of sugarcane. So that's about almost a half day's worth of work. That'll all get crushed in the field immediately. So we try to go.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So we do all of our crushing in the field, and Tyler will talk a little bit about what happens right after this. But there's 500 gallons of juice is a typical yield. We only do a single pressing, and it's all single varietal. So you can imagine, and this is maybe a point of contention for some folks, but you can imagine that these 2 things don't taste the same.
Wait, I don't know. Make sure everyone can see those.
Yeah. Kea,
right. I mean, just looking at the physical appearance, my guess would be there's no way that they could taste, exactly alike.
And you would never end up with a Wrightner that said Pinot Grigio tasted like Pinot Noir.
Right.
But you end up in this weird space in the rum world where like people have commoditized so much of it that they forget that there's an opportunity for that. And maybe we're surrounded by all these different varietals, so we understand it on the daily. And we're not just worried about conversion of alcohol into ethanol. We're worried about the other flavors that come along with that.
Right.
But like, that's who we are. We're a fresh cane juice rum that we define as Hawaiian agricole. We never separate those words. I know there's contention about the word agricole, and I feel you. We can talk in the Q&A, I'm sure, about that. But there's a real truth about these plants being the driving force for everything we do through fresh juice.
Yeah, well, I think that I'm glad you brought up that point about the difference in taste between the varietals, because I have heard both perspectives from distillers that have worked with fresh sugarcane juice, making rum from it. Some have told me, that their philosophy and the distiller told me this wasn't saying he was calling anyone wrong who disagrees, but he was saying in his experience, how you do your fermentation, how you do your distillation has a much bigger impact. But then I've heard the exact opposite perspective from producers like yourselves who really value having those different varietals and stuff. So I think it's great that there's multiple perspectives like that, because I think the way that those inform your process is going to end up with just more options for consumers like myself to enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes when we get into these things, we see them both as like opposing viewpoints, when that's not actually true. If you choose to value production over plants, it is going to be the most important part of your thing. If you're telling me, yes, Tyler can make every rum taste differently, even if they're the same cane varietal, because he can make that choice. I don't disagree with that at all.
Right.
That's where the value lies, is in the fact that your hands are doing all of this stuff. That's just not our driving force. Our driving force is actually keeping everything else consistent. And I'll leave Tyler to talk about how he does it. But yeah, we want the only difference between our rums in single marks to be the cane, nothing else.
And I left this image up on the screen just because I wanted to ask about this mill, because it looks pretty different from a lot of the mills that I've seen. It's
on the other side of the juice tote. So it's not of the mill. So they're literally like, you have hidden the mill behind a 500-gallon juice tote. So
it's just hiding right behind it. Okay, it looks like it's going into the tote. I was like, this is really interesting.
No, it's such I love that's the picture, because it's like there's the three parts: whole cane, juice, and bagasse afterwards. Who knows how that happened?
Mm-hmm. And
there's a roller mill on the other side of that.
Okay.
It's got 4 large rollers going. It can do about a ton of cane an hour.
Awesome. And we had John Atkins just said in the comment that one thing he really liked about visiting KoHana is that they start you with a small glass and taste of the fresh pressed cane juice crushed right in front of you. That does sound like it'd be pretty good right about now.
For sure.
And when you guys do that, do you have people taste different varietals?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll have like a varietal of the day, and we'll usually try to match it up against one of the rums people will be tasting.
Very cool.
You'll get to taste the fresh juice versus an unaged versus an aged expression of all the same cane. So you're watching this cane sort of go through it. We'll have a cutting on the bar top. And then especially for like our bar partners or our industry friends, we can do cane flights where you literally are just tasting the differences.
Oh, that's great.
It's really cool. I mean, even for like starkly dark canes, the juice will actually come out pigmented. So instead of just being like green and yellow, it'll come out like purplish gray.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, I remember when I had some of the guys from KoHana on, they crushed some cane, and one of the ones that they did, it almost was like gray just within a few minutes. The color started to change a little bit. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it oxidizes so quickly.
Yeah. So I'd love to, Tyler, maybe this would be where you come in. I'd love to talk about, get into the production process a little bit. And from what I understand, it starts to happen pretty quickly after what we see in this picture. So I'd love if you could just take us into, what happens after the cane is crushed. You've got the juice. Where do you go from there?
Okay. So like you mentioned before, it oxidizes really quickly. So what I'll do is we use an ADY, an active dry yeast, and that'll actually get pitched out into the field. The reason why we use this ADY is, like Kyle mentioned before, we want to try to keep everything consistent so we can try to taste the nuances between the canes instead of nuances in different production procedures.